Welcome, everybody, to the final episode of The Owl Nest. The season has now finished. It is
We're
behind us.
free.
We're free. After watching as much Overwatch League as we have, yeah, I'm ready to be done. I'm so ready to be done with this. I love Overwatch League just as much as everybody else, but after watching so many matches, I'm done. I'm so done with it. Playoffs are over though. We've all finished. I got to go to them in person. As I'm showing off my hat, look at all those backwards signatures coming through on camera. Look at them all. There,
Kind
I
of coming through.
I could have gotten more signatures. Like I saw a lot more players, but there were some people I didn't want to get. I didn't like care to get a signature for, and there were others I just didn't want to bother. It's like, yeah, I saw Unter and Hawk, but did I want Unter and Hawk's signature? Not really. And like, yeah, I saw Proper, but his hands were full with his Rookie of the Year and MVP trophy. I didn't want to bother him. Um, so no, actually, do you want to start with analysis and then story time, or do you want to start with story time and then analysis?
Let's story time and then close off with analysis.
All right, so
I am curious to hear.
yeah, so I
about
haven't told
Great
Brad
Devil
any of the
Woman.
stories. So obviously, I went to playoffs, Thursday and Friday on the third and the fourth. Saw the matches. All of that was normal. So what it was is that it seemed like a majority of the players were all staying in the Hilton that's on the same lot as the convention center. And so what we did was Friday after the grand finals happened, me and friends that I had made kind of standing in line because we got in line like super early, and so we had made friends with the people who got in line early, and that was who we sat with. So Friday night we all went into like the lounge bar area of the hotel of the Hilton, and there were so many players there. I mean, like they're all of the Western teams for the most part were there. I didn't see any APAC players, so I don't know if they were in the hotel or they just didn't want to be there. But I mean, I was seeing everybody from Christopher and Hottie to Proper, Kilo, and Striker, seeing
Crazy.
everybody. So that was where I got most of the signatures. I almost had all the Spitfire players other than Landon and Khan. I never saw them.
Which is tragic because
I never saw Landon. I saw all the other ones. But what was funny, and so I saw like Dante and Space come out of the elevator, got theirs. I have a photo with them. I caught Jake as he was like rushing somewhere, so I don't have a photo with him, unfortunately. I was the first person to ask Christopher for a signature, surprisingly enough, Friday night. But no, so the best story time. So we were there, and one of my friends had ordered pizza, and so we were eating pizza around the table, and Poco is walking around the corner, and we went up. He was with Hottie, and so we got signatures with Hottie, and we had already talked with Poco earlier in the evening because he was with Christopher, and we were like, "Hey, Poco, we've got pizza. You want to come eat with us?" And he was drunk. He was so drunk, you could tell. We were like, "You want to come have pizza with us, Poco?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come have pizza with you." He comes and sits down, and like the Parmesan cheese and like crushed red pepper packets that always come. He was like looking at him and he's like, "Ooh, crushed red pepper. Let's do pepper shots." And we're like, "Poco, what?" And he's like, "All right, everybody put out your hand," in his French accent. So he puts like red pepper, he pours red pepper out on our hands. He goes, 3, 2, 1, go. And we all put it in our mouth, and Poco's like sitting there feeling it. He's like, this was a bad idea. And we're like, "Yes, Poco, it was." And like we talk with a little bit. We're like, "Poco, do you know what the next Overwatch League team is?" And he's like, "I'm not saying anything. Nope, can't say." But then he like wanders off. He like follows some random dude into the elevator. He's like walking like this. He just like walks up behind a dude in the elevator, and then we don't see him for like 20, 30 minutes. And then Backbone and Sparker come down. And we get their signatures. We talk to them. And then they're like, "Have you guys seen Poco at all?" And we're like, "We saw him like 30 minutes ago. We don't know where he's at now." And they're like, "Okay, no problem." And so they go to the elevator to go up to their room. The elevator opens and Poco's in there, and they're just like, "Poco!" And he comes and throws his arms around their shoulders. And then after that, they were far enough away that we didn't hear the conversation, but based on the body language and the facial expressions, we could tell what the conversation was. We're pretty sure it was something along the lines of, "Poco, have you been drinking a lot?" "Oh, no, no, don't worry, I'm fine." They're like, "You don't look fine." And Backbone puts his hands on Poco's shoulders and probably said something along the lines of, "Buddy, you need to stop." And then he goes to the bar, and Sparker like turns around. He's like, no, dude, you don't need anything more to drink. And Pogo's like, no, I'm still going to order something. And we're watching this happen from a distance as they're like trying to convince Pogo to stop drinking. And we were in the lounge for like 3 hours just watching this. And like Shax was like walking around, like aimlessly walking around. And like all of the Western players, for the most part, had like just this, what it could be described as just a frat club. They were all just gathered. And like after the Shock players went up and put their stuff down, Proper comes walking back down in like slides and PJs and just goes and talks to all the Western players. It really surprised me how good Proper's English was. I didn't think that he was going to be mingling with the Western players quite as much as he was, but it was like the amount of concentrated skill that was in that single room at that day was crazy.
Oh, I bet. That's
I
crazy.
mean, it was everybody from someone in Hydron to Proper and Striker. Like, everybody was there.
I'm so jealous.
It was so much fun. The arena was cool. Everything was cool. I met Avril and Lemon and just met all kinds of players. I have Fearless and Sparkle's signature, Rascal, all kinds of people on this Contenders hat, you know?
Yeah, which is kind of disappointing that it's a Contenders
Yeah,
hat.
but it was all I had. I mean, I got like,
man.
they had like player cards, you know, like the upper deck. So like they had a booth that you could make them. And then I got like stickers and stuff. But this was the best thing I had for signatures. I was just happy that I brought a permanent marker. I had the foresight to bring one with me. I was basically like the designated marker guy because no one else in our group had one. So anytime someone was like saw someone to get us, they were like, give me your marker. So like we had one of the guys that we were sitting with was a Gladiators fan. So when we saw Kevster and Unter, he went and got their signatures. The funniest thing we had, there wasn't in our group, there was this one guy who went up to Nero and he was like, Nero, could you sign my jersey? And this guy was handing Nero a Gladiators jersey. And Nero's like, you want me to sign the Glads jersey? And the guy was like, yeah. And Nero's like, okay. He signs his Gladiators jersey. And you could tell that Nero was just like, are you really sure you want me to sign your Gladiators jersey? Just the whole night. I mean, we were there till like 2 in the morning.
But when Nero gets transferred to
the Gladiators, yeah, that guy's gonna look.
That guy's gonna be like, look, I knew it.
The whole night was so fun, and I mean the arena was awesome. I mean, we were cheering for Butterfingers. We did like a 10-minute long wave that was set up by Golden Boy. It was crazy. But enough about story time. Let's actually talk about games, shall we?
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about with these games. What a tournament. It was so cool. And I think if it's all right with you, I think I would love to start by talking about the top 2 teams.
Yeah, let's start with the Shock and the Fuel. For once, for the first time in our lives, we got the Giga Banger that was promised.
It was so good. And I was thinking about this. So coming into this season, when everyone was doing their preseason power rankings, Fuel were almost always like
we had them
either
at 2
at the top or near the top. And the Shock, everyone was like
unsure about. Yeah,
they're probably way overrated, but maybe a top 4, maybe a top 5. But most people, like on like Reddit, for example, if you had Shock in the top 3 or 4, everyone would be like, "Oh, you're just a Shock fanboy."
Yeah, and it was just a completely rookie roster.
But then for them to come out, like I think there are a lot of really cool storylines this year, and I think one of the greats is San Francisco Shock as an organization showing, look, you know, even in a like rebuilding year, we're a top team. And I think they really showed that this tournament, and that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it helps when you have the Rookie of the Year and MVP on your team, but I mean...
Oh, yeah. Well, and that last match was proper against the world. Like...
It really was proper against the world. I mean, he was pulling fights out of his butt.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing looked like a proper highlight reel.
Yeah.
Like, if you looked away and looked back... Like, if you just watch the fights back to back, it looks like a proper...
It was just a proper highlight reel, and they were just losing maps. But it was finally a map 7, and it was so awesome to finally get a 7 map grand finals, because the closest we had was a 4-2 in 2020, but all the other ones were 4-0s or like close to. So getting the number 1 and number 2 seeds, battling it out and going to a full 7, and it was even map 7 was fairly somewhat close. It wasn't like it was a stomp, but it was like back and forth the whole time. The thing that I was hoping for was that Fuel were going to win the second control map, so that Shock was going to pick Circuit Royale, because we were talking with some of the Fuel fans, and like it would have been interesting to see how Fuel approached Circuit Royale, because it would have either forced them to try and like see how good Sparkle's Sojourn was, or to put Gurio back in to go with Edison. And that, I was honestly wanting to see that. I was wanting to see a Gurio Edison versus Kilo proper hit scan battle, but Shock won the control map, so we didn't end up going there.
Yeah, that would have definitely been interesting to see, but alas, we didn't.
Nope.
And I just gotta say, this last weekend was like the best weekend in gaming history. We had Gigabanger
Gigabanger
in
Overwatch League, and then
final, and then League
Worlds
of Legends
went to 5 as well.
Went to 5 as well, or yeah, went to 5, and it was so hyped. Like what a weekend, you know? Like,
well, and like even viewership for, like, just speaking of the playoffs in general, viewership was like averaging like 160, 170K. I think the grand finals peaked at like 270 or something, which is crazy.
Yeah, Overwatch has never seen those kinds of numbers as far as I know.
Since season 1.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't.
I mean, Overwatch League is back, boys. Right at the end of the season, I'm hopeful. Like, this whole season has been like, is the league gonna survive? Are we gonna have a season 6? But after this week, having those kind of numbers and having a Butterfinger sponsorship that honestly kind of popped off for anybody that was there in the arena, anytime anything Butterfinger was mentioned, we just started chanting Butterfinger. Like, any sponsors who are unsure if they want to sponsor the league, just look at what happened with Butterfinger, and the fans are just immediately going to love the sponsorship, whether it's a meme or not.
I don't know about you, but like the last several days, man, I've just wanted some Butterfinger. Like, it sounds so good.
That's so funny. You just wanted some Butterfinger.
And I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, one of my coworkers brought a bunch of candy to work, and I was like actively looking for Butterfingers.
Yeah, I'm like, that sponsors, like when I saw that we had a sponsorship for the playoffs, I was like, here we go. It's one step at a time. Next season, we're gonna get all the other sponsors back. But talking again about the matches, before we derail too much, looking at the Fuel and the Shock, I don't really think that anything has changed. Anything changes with these teams moving into next season. I'd be very surprised if we see anything change, except maybe in like the Shock tank line or something. I mean, do you think they keep Collusion Mikey into next season?
I think they could. I think it could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if they changed, but I think as is, they look really good, and I think like Mikey and Collusion, like there's only up from here. Like, I feel like last season it was kind of like, I mean, like, I'm already talking like it's way over, but
throughout the season, Mikey especially.
Yeah, and it was, they were put in the hardest situations
to fill Super's shoes.
To fill Super shoes, to come in, in really without a lot of time, like preseason. They, like, neither of them really had a preseason.
Well, Mikey came in after
kickoff, yeah. And so I think the fact that they were able to do as good as they did is really telling. And I think they have options, whether they stay with the Shock or go to another team. They'll definitely be in the league next year.
Yeah, they'll definitely be in the league. I think the biggest thing with the Shock is the Shock get first dibs on the O2 Blast players, specifically Heesang.
Oh, that's
And the
true.
conversation is whether or not the Shock will try their best to put Heesang on that roster. Because I mean, if they roll into next season with a proper Heesang DPS line, that is probably one of the most nutty DPS lines we've ever seen. If
Yeah.
Heesang translates to being good in the league like he's doing in Contenders, I'd say that's probably the only thing you see for the Shock is them picking up Heesang and pairing him with Proper, and you end up with just an unbeatable duo. Now, granted, does Proper stay at the same level that he did this season? We'll have to see. I mean, most of the other MVPs the
So,
following season they drop off a little bit. But I mean, if you pair him with Heesang, that's a scary DPS line.
well, and the thing about Proper though is it's not like he came out of nowhere and had a killer season.
No,
It's
we
like
expected it.
he's been performing at this level for years, and so I don't think like most of the other MVPs, as far as I can remember, it's like
They came out
they
of
had
nowhere.
outlandishly good like the seasons before that or their pro careers leading up to that, they weren't playing at the same level
I mean,
as
in the
they
case
did
of
when they
Jonak,
came out.
he didn't even have a pro career before that.
Exactly. So I think Proper is kind of in a different place, and so it'll be interesting to see. But my guess is next year he'll still be pretty.
Yeah, I'm sure Shock will probably just retool their DPS line. The Fuel, on the other hand, I think they probably also retool their DPS line. Do you see a world in which Gurio is on this team next year? I think that depends on what their plan for him, because it seems like their plan for Gurio was not to play this season, but then it just kind of like happened.
Yeah.
So I think he might be a long-term project unless Edison showed them enough that they feel like they don't need another hit scan player.
Yeah. I think he's definitely the most likely to leave out of the Fuel, but
They may just not touch it. I mean, they just won, so they may just run it back. So these two teams, I mean, it's crazy how untouchable these two teams are. Like no one.
And regardless of meta, too. Like, I mean, for the most part, I think each team had like one meta a piece. I think that they kind of struggled with.
Shock
But
overall did okay, and well, no, in
yeah,
the Countdown Cup meta,
I
they
was
were
gonna say
struggling a bit.
they kind of struggled there. And then the Fuel kind of struggled with
In midseason madness when they were
yeah.
because they just couldn't. I mean, they still went 4-2 that stage though, which is hilarious. But it's like they didn't
Yeah, but
look as confident.
it's like struggled, you know.
Yeah,
It's not
struggle
actually
with quotation marks. But I don't think they touched their rosters a whole lot. The game was awesome and it was really close, so I don't think Shock needs to like worry too much, especially if they try and add Heesang to this roster. That's scary.
yeah.
So they're
Well,
just
and I think with the Shock being as young as they are, I think going into future seasons, like if next year, if Shock doesn't change their roster,
mhm.
I don't think any other roster is going to be able to like if you don't have Shock at the beginning of your preseason power rankings next season,
Yeah.
either Shock did something wrong in the offseason or some other team went absolutely nuts
Threw
by
money at people, yeah.
yeah. But
Best of the
I think
best.
that's gonna be
Yeah, untouchable Titans at the top. So we have three other tiers of teams here. So should we just kind of just drop down, in terms of power level here?
yeah, let's
So
do that.
the next tier of teams are the teams that really exceeded expectations in this tournament. So we're talking about the Houston Outlaws, the Spark, and the Spitfire. Which one of the three do you want to start with?
Is that a question? Let's talk about my boys.
Let's start with the Spitfire. It's depending on who you ask will determine will like may determine whether or not people thought they were an underdog coming into their Fusion game. It seemed like most people thought that they were at least a slight underdog. Then they pounded Fusion in the dirt. But then coming into the Glads match, no one in their right mind thought they were winning this game. And they made the Gladiators look silly.
Yeah. The fact that London and Houston played each other
in the upper bracket semis.
Yeah, like okay, that was weird.
I mean, it required not only did it require picks to go the right way, it required them to both win matches that they should not really have won.
Yeah. I think London has like every reason to be happy with the way they performed in the tournament and also in the entire season. I think there's a reason they were fan favorites. Not to say I called it or anything, because I definitely didn't predict them to do this well.
No.
But I did say, if you remember, I was like, something's gonna happen with the Spitfire, because C9 doesn't lose opening seasons. They always overperform
Yeah.
for new games. And they did.
They did
And
very well.
it was amazing. I think there wasn't another team out there that was more fun to watch. Like anytime they capped a point, it was C9s in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
In honor of their organization, for no other
Of course,
reason.
of course.
But they were just, it was great. I loved watching them this year, and they're awesome.
Yeah.
Go Spitfire.
Spitfire in a good place. I mean, they finished tied for 6th with the Seoul Dynasty. Just think about that for a second. They placed basically the same as the Seoul Dynasty.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they rolled.
And that includes beating out the Gladiators.
They beat the Gladiators.
And they beat the Gladiators, and they went farther in the tournament than the Gladiators.
And the Reign and the Dragons.
Yeah,
it was. I mean, their win against the Fusion just didn't show up. But then Gladiators, they made the Gladiators look silly. And then, to be fair, they went against the Outlaws, who, in their own right, were on something. I don't know what kind of.
Houston looked nuts.
I don't know what kind of Adderall they gave Merritt and Dante coming into this bracket, but holy crap! If Dante really only had 5 days of practice on Winston, this guy is. I don't think we've ever seen another player like Dante.
It is a crime that Dante wasn't nominated for
anything.
For anything, right? Yeah, he should have been at least a tank roll star, and possible MVP candidate. I'm convinced, and this tournament just made that more.
He just showed up. 5 days of practice on Winston, diffed Muse, diffed Kaluge, diffed Hottie. And then
this is someone who is still listed on Liquipedia
as a DPS player.
He is still not even DPS tank. He is a DPS player. According to Liquipedia.
The Outlaws, they finally, I mean, third, they haven't placed this high since Stage 1 of 2018. Since Season 1, Stage 1, they have never done this well. They've never even made end-of-season playoffs. First time they come in, Dante is off-rolling on Winston, and Merritt is pounding. And then they ran into the Fuel and the Shock, which I don't think anybody can fault them for getting I mean, they took a map off the Fuel. I mean, that's more than the Dynasty can say.
Yeah, that's more than
most teams can say.
Most teams.
Well, Spark took a map off them.
Yeah, Spark looked pretty dang solid.
Yeah, it's just the Outlaws going top 3 is... I did not expect them to beat the Shock, first of all. I don't know how they did it. Merritt was statistically, I think, the best Sojourn in the tournament. I don't know what his stats were like after the loss to Shock, but I know going in, he was still better than Proper on the stat card.
Yeah.
Him and Pelican were the only 2 players, I think, going into Thursday or Friday that averaged over 20 limbs per 10 minutes. It was just them. Everyone else was less than 20. The whole team was firing on all cylinders until they went to Friday. And, well, I can't blame them for what happened on Thursday and Friday. It was just so awesome watching them win. When they won that Shock game, I was like, holy crap. We're going to make top 6. And then when London beat Gladiators, I was like, holy crap, we're going to make top 3.
Yeah.
But then the Spark. Unless you had more to say about the Outlaws.
No, we're good. We don't need to talk about the Outlaws more.
So moving on to the Spark, once again, showing that they are, for some reason, the best APAC team when it comes to international tournaments.
Yeah, which is super weird to me. It's the Spark is kind of they are the enigma of APAC. Regular season, they were okay.
They lost
every international tournament.
They lost 12 of their last 14 matches in the regular season. I don't know if that was.
And then this happened. Yeah, you lose to Dallas, but you take a map, and then you go on a crazy lower bracket run, eliminating Toronto Defiant,
Florida Mayhem, London Spitfire,
and then taking a map off of the Shock. They took a map off of each of the finalists.
Yeah,
That's that's crazy.
I
Like,
mean, the Spark got lucky with a Winston meta where they could put in Gooshway, who was still a nutcase on Winston, and
that's
then
true.
could once again go shy, go kill, and he did shy things.
Is it so? My question with this whole thing is: it just because the Spark fit international play more? Like, if they were in North America, would Spark be a top team?
They'd at least be a mid-table team. But I mean, in the regular season in APAC, they were getting booty slammed, and based off of this tournament and everything that's gone on, APAC as a region sucked more than NA. So
Yeah.
it's really
So
hard to say.
yeah, it's weird. I'm confused about the Spark. I'm disappointed in the rest of APAC, but I'm confused by the Spark.
The Spark went far. They made top 4. No, they got 4th. Good job, Spark. You got 4th.
Good job, Spark.
Good job. You did it again. Shy went and killed
Put
everything.
APAC on the you put APAC on the map.
It was so Spark were fun to watch because Teru was a menace on the Kiriko. He was probably the most
Oh,
fun
yeah.
Kiriko to watch because he was playing her like a Genji.
Yeah.
Like he was up in backlines, like challenging DPS to 1v1s, and like no other Kiriko was doing that.
Which Kiriko kind of nuts, kind of crazy fun to watch. I don't know if you noticed, but there were times that like a fight would be won. Like there was one example I can think of right now where London had lost the fight and it was Kiriko alive on point, got a triple.
I think I do
Like,
remember seeing that. Yeah.
it was crazy. Like stuff like that happened. Like Kiriko is such a playmaker.
Kiriko was fun. And this playoff meta, even though it was like really repetitive, this is probably some of the most fast-paced Overwatch we've ever seen.
Yeah. Like I kind of felt bad for all the new people watching because I was like, this is like crazy Overwatch.
Supersonic
This is, like,
speeds.
yeah, and like just the way it played out, it was like one way I was talking to one of my buddies about it, and it was like it almost felt like it had the like the strategic depth of some of the more intense metas like goats and stuff. It had like some of the strategic
But it was
depth of those,
speedy.
but was fast and it gave like the whole thing. It was all about like giving people opportunities to go nuts and pop off on like the Sojourn or the Kiriko
Or the Reaper.
the Reaper.
Can I just take a moment to say I don't really understand how Reaper, because it's like coming into the playoffs, the rumors were that it was going to be Kiriko Winston with Tracer. But then apparently something happened in scrims in the days leading up to the playoffs where they went, actually no, we're just going to play Reaper instead.
Yeah, I think and I was thinking about it, and I think there are a couple things that Reaper really adds that Tracer doesn't. I think one, Kiriko ult is like nuts.
He becomes a Gatling gun.
And I think he applies pressure to
Winston
that prevents him from being able to dive the backline.
Well, because we saw Tracer be used, and it was to very limited success.
It was not good.
But it was funny watching the Reapers play, because it was like when they went to Death Blossom, it was feast or famine. You either got like a 3K or you got your head immediately taken off by a Sojourn.
And usually it was like both Reapers would do it at the same time. Whoever timed it right got the kill, and the other one just...
Well, and it was really interesting coming in, and the Outlaws did this especially. It was like with sound barriers, because it was like you either used your sound barrier to counter the other sound barrier, or you used it to counter the Kiriko, because it's like the Kiriko ults were always used at the same time. Basically always. And then the sound barriers were usually used at the same time, or used to counter a Death Blossom. And what Lastro was doing was he was always trying to beat second, and that came back to bite him in the butt against the Fuel and the Shock. But it was like really interesting to see how like different teams used ults, because like Dante with his Primal Rages, he used them to initiate. He would jump in and immediately prop Primal, and most of the Winstons would Primal to knock away the ulting Sojourn on the other side. Like it was like this interplay between the various characters was really interesting to watch, and how different teams went about it. Because the Outlaws were always trying to beat second and using Dante to zone, but then like the Shock were always just trying to beat aggressively, because Violet was... If there's one thing you could count on in the playoffs, it was Violet getting beat before the other Lucio. Almost consistently.
Oh, yeah.
Consistently charging beat like 30-40% faster, and I could never understand why. I was like, what? His team is
Exactly.
losing, and he has beat, and the other Lucio's only at 70%. What are you doing? What are you
Well,
doing,
that's the thing.
Violet?
If your team's taking more damage, you get more heals.
But even when they were winning, they were doing it.
I know.
So looking at the Outlaws, the Spitfire, and the Spark, how do you think you see these rosters changing? For me, I think the Spitfire are a superstar DPS away from being good because it's like Sparker was good, but he wasn't like Merit or Proper or Edison or Shy. It's like because like they beat the Gladiators off of team fundamentals. So it's
Yeah.
like if the team they are playing is mentally boomed and not there, then they'll beat them. We saw that when they played the Outlaws in the Summer Showdown. We saw that when they played the Gladiators here. It's like they'll beat you with fundamentals. But if the other team's fundamentals are good and it's just a skill matchup, Spitfire almost just always will lose because they can't get to the same heights. Because like when they played the Outlaws, they couldn't match Merit. Merit was just unhinged.
That being said, I think the smart thing. So we have to think because there's two sides to these teams. There's the you know getting better skill wise, but then there's also keeping your fan base
Yeah.
and appeasing them. And I think not just that, but also like if you want to sell merchandise and stuff like that, like having a fan favorite team is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think London would be stupid to change their roster unless a player wanted out.
No,
I think
I don't think that they
so. I
would be
think
dumb to
even if
release
they,
anybody.
yeah, and I think even bringing on, because like I don't think individually any single player is like I was shocked that Hottie got Rollstar because I don't think he's a top 4 tank. If I'm
Yeah.
being honest, I love Hottie. I think he's amazing. He brings a lot of value to the team,
But
but he is not a top 4 tank.
no.
There it is. And I feel that way about all of their team. I think individually they aren't amazing, but I think they bring something together that
Their
other teams
fundamentals
in
are
Overwatch League don't.
pretty great.
Their fundamentals, and also like you look at like your stories about Poco with getting drunk and eating pizza, and then his teammates came down and stuff, and you look at the way they interact with each other, both on and off
Yeah,
stage. These guys are buddies. These guys are
they are.
friends. They like everything I've seen points to that, and I think it makes sense for their roster to stay the same. If anything, just because like if they were to swap it out, like let's say Crazy Proper joins London Spitfire, I think in a way it makes the team worse.
It might. I think that if Spitfire add any players, they'll be European players. They're the only team
Yeah.
left that is like going for European talent. The only change I could see happening is if Poco decides he wants to try and have opportunities somewhere else, or if he just decides to hang it up because he didn't really get a whole lot of play time. And I mean, we asked him about it when we were eating with him, but I mean, he obviously wasn't gonna say anything. And
Yeah.
he didn't give us a whole lot to work with because why would he? But it's like if anything was gonna change with the Spitfire, it would be like Shax and Poco potentially retiring or going to other teams because they just didn't get to play at all. Just
Yeah, and I
because.
could see that, but
So
yeah.
Spitfire, I don't imagine will change, but if they do, it'll be Europeans coming or going. The Spark, I think their tank line will stay unless they find an upgrade over Bernard. Their DPS line is fine. I think Alfie Pineapple Shy is fine. Their back line, super rich. It's like he's their Lucio player. They just need to figure out what they're wanting to do with Irony and Neko. And like where
Yeah.
Teru fits in because like they've got a massive roster just for the sake of having a massive
Well,
roster.
and I think one thing we learned this season is having like 5 players that can play anything within their role is usually a benefit. Like I
Yeah,
think the teams that only have one tank player that plays everything
did better than
like
the ones that had to
did better
swap them
than
in
the
and out.
ones that had to swap. And I think going into the next season, I think a lot of teams are going to trim their benches a little bit. And also I think when it happens, everyone's going to point to the money and be like, "This is financial." But I think there are gameplay benefits to
To
having a
just
tight
running the
roster,
same 5-man roster, never having to
and I
swap.
think throughout this season and coming into this season, that was an issue we knew that this team would have, and so I think going into next season, they might Like I don't see them keeping all
I
of
don't
their
know.
back
It seemed
line.
like the Spark are contractually obligated to have a full roster. I don't know why. That's just how they roll.
But it's kind of nice. Like they're paying more players and
I
stuff.
mean, they
Like
did just come fourth in the playoffs. So I mean, did it all turn out well in the end? Somehow,
yeah,
Chengun. I don't know how it. I don't know how it happened.
I think what they do is they just split their roster in half. They have a Hangzhou Spark, um,
Blue and a
APAC,
Hangzhou
and then
Spark
well, they
red
have one in APAC and one that they
in
keep in
NA.
NA, and that
They
way
play in
they're
both
always
regions.
yeah, exactly,
Oh
easy.
no. I don't know what Spark will do. Now, looking at the Outlaws, I think the Outlaws are the most interesting of the three because the Outlaws have a big decision to make of what they want to do with Dante. Now, if I was Jake and I was Shadow, I would talk to Dante, and if Dante didn't have a preference, I'd keep him on tank. I would go all in on Dante and have him spend the offseason just grinding the tank heroes to be better. Because, I mean, if he was this good on Winston with 5 days of practice, give him the whole offseason to learn Winston and Reinhardt. There's your tank player. You just run
So
Dante.
I think different strategy. So
Uh-oh.
Dante plays well when he's on the spot and everyone's expecting him to not do well.
No, he's
And
not
so
playing support. No.
what you do is you make him play support, but don't tell him until like a week before the season starts. Be like, Dante, I'm sorry, but
we joked with him about that. We were
grind
like,
Kiriko.
here we go. We're going to see Dante on support. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I think that the Outlaws should. Now, do I think they should release Doge? Probably. I don't think that Doge has a place on this roster, unfortunately. It's like, just go all in on Dante. Unless Dante has a really strong preference to play DPS, which it doesn't sound like he does.
Which when he was speaking about it, like every time he's been asked about it and stuff like that, he's always said like
Whatever the team needs. Yeah, so
he'll
I
play.
think the Outlaws should go all in on Dante on tank. Keep the back line. I think you could make a question of should they keep Lep or try and get another main support. It's whatever. I think Creative and Lastro are really good players. So the back line, the main, those two should stay. They'd be dumb to let them go. And then it's just like, what do they do with Lep? The real question comes in the DPS line. Like, obviously, they would be idiots to let Merritt go. 100%. Merritt is like the best player on that team, like skill-wise. Yeah. But the question comes with what the heck is happening with Pelican? Because Pelican only came to this team to play with Piggy, and Piggy's not here anymore. So do the Outlaw it's the question of does Pelican want to leave to go play with Piggy, or does Pelican want to stay? Because I imagine the Outlaws want to keep Pelican. There's no way that the Outlaws are trying to get rid of Pelican. So it's does Pelican want to leave to play with Piggy? Do the Outlaws re-sign Piggy in order to keep Pelican? Because it's like, I think if the Outlaws are able to keep this core 5-man roster and then maybe sign another DPS or tank player just to like round out the bench just in case, like they could make another run next season. But it's like, what do they do with Pelican? Because if Pelican leaves, suddenly there's a massive hole there. And like, yeah, there's a bunch of Korean contenders talent out there, but they're not, unless they're willing to throw the bag to try and get like Heesang or something, no one's going to be able to like be what Pelican was.
Yeah, that's true. It's going to be interesting. I think as a player, it makes more sense for Pelican to stay, but as a person, I don't know if he's going to want to.
I think
I hope he does.
I hope he does, because if the Outlaws run this roster back with a full commitment to Dante's tank play, they should be really good next season. So these three teams doing really well. Next group of 3 teams, the teams that did about as we expected. Defiant, Mayhem, Dynasty. Now, Dynasty could be seen as a controversial one because you'd be like, oh, they only won 1 game and then got bowed out. But do remember, they beat the Mayhem and then immediately went up against the Fuel and the Shock. So can you blame them for losing those 2 games? Not really. I mean, they did go 0-6 in maps against those 2 teams, but then again, so did almost everybody else. So I think it's like the Dynasty just kind of got unlucky with how the bracket went for them.
Yeah, but I think either way they would have. Like, I think they went as far as they would have gotten, no matter what.
If they had been on the other side of the bracket and had played the Spark instead, I think they probably would have been able to take it to them a little bit.
Yeah, potentially.
But
Yeah.
it's like Dynasty. I think we expected Dynasty to. I mean, they got top six.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they did as well as they could, and then just faced the brick wall that was the best two teams. So you can't really fault them for that. I think they got a little ahead of themselves though in their shot game, putting Profit in on Kiriko for some reason. I don't really understand what happened with that
Yeah,
one.
it was pretty questionable. But they've been known to do some funky stuff.
Yeah, they
And,
have.
and sometimes it works out, but usually it
Doesn't?
doesn't. But I don't think they would have won either way.
No,
So
I don't think. I think Dynasty went as far as they could. I mean, Fitz was doing Fitz things, and Profit was still playing well. I thought Smurf definitely got diffed though by Collusion
yeah,
Fearless, and Iris didn't look as good on the Kiriko as they probably would have liked. But I mean, I don't know what happens with this roster next season. I don't know if they keep all of their pieces. If Profit goes first, what would this be? His third, fourth season on the Dynasty because he joined in 2020. Yeah. So I don't
yeah,
know if Profit sticks around. Most of the roster, if Fitz stays around, like they may stay or Soul may decide to move on from some of these older pieces and try and
yeah.
get some contenders talent in there.
And I think I like out of the teams we've talked about, I think Seoul is the most likely to like I think Seoul and Spark are both likely to have some changes, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if Seoul changed over half of their team,
Yeah, I wouldn't
made
either.
some like big sweeping changes.
So they did about as well as we thought. But then so did Mayhem and Defiant. Defiant did exactly as we thought. Went 0-2, perfectly mid, bombed out immediately. But did anybody expect them to do anything more than that? Not really. Did anybody think Defiant were going to do anything in this tournament? No.
No.
No. I mean, they got slapped by the Outlaws. And then to be fair, they almost beat the Spark. We were almost in a world in which Defiant won over Spark, and that would have really messed with things because then Mayhem would have played Spitfire and Spitfire could have won that and they could have made top 4. So, good job Defiant. You figured out another way to throw. Lose. Perfectly
Naturally,
mid. 12th place.
as it should be.
As it should be. Now, the Florida Mayhem did some tomfoolery and single-handedly knocking the rain out of the brackets, which was honestly kind of hilarious. Not gonna lie. I mean, they made the rain look
They went
silly,
their entire year just to play one team twice and lose.
and
They got one.
then get rolled by the Dynasty, and then get rolled by the Spark. I thought Mayhem probably were just happy to be here because I mean it was like London. They probably did not expect that they would be in this position at the end of the season. Hydron was starting to pop off towards the tail end of the regular season. So coming into the tournament, I was pretty high in the Mayhem. I thought they were at least going to be able to take a match or two, which they did, off the
Yeah.
back of Hydron and Checkmate. Because someone's Winston. That's his best hero. So you put someone and Hydron on their best heroes. I mean, there you
It's
go.
gonna happen.
It's your recipe for success. Good job, Mayhem. Looking at these teams, Defiant is an odd one. Surely they don't let this backline go, but then again, it depends on if they sign 2-year contracts with Churong and Twilight or a single-year contract, because they threw a lot of money at Churong. Rumor is that his contract may be one of the highest in the leagues, higher than anybody. We're talking like upwards of almost 400K for this guy.
Yeah, and like I feel like with Toronto, it's like the exact opposite of London, where it's like if you look at the individual pieces, they tend to be greater than the whole. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these players found new homes.
I would be surprised if Although and Finale are still on this team next season. Maybe even I wouldn't be surprised if their DPS line got overhauled and if they didn't try and find a replacement for Muse. Or if they just go all in on Hotba. I think they should just go all in on Hotba and let Hotba learn main tank and then just overhaul their DPS line a little bit. Because,
I think, like we said before, like having a single tank player that can play everything is advantageous. And during this offseason, I think it makes sense for teams to figure out, okay, who's our tank player?
Yeah.
Start grinding.
Because it's like they're deep. Although looked not. I mean, I'll be very surprised if Although is on this team next season. He kind of underwhelmed a little bit. Finale stepped in and played Genji, which was supposedly Altho's role. Hisu was hit or miss. When he was on fire, he was hitting it, but when he was not on fire, he was getting
Very
hit.
much not.
The only thing about this Defiant team that should stay is their support line, but they may not want to. I mean, it depends on how much money Defiant is willing to throw at players. I mean, they may just decide to completely overhaul their roster and just throw money at people again. So, just to be perfectly mid, who knows? They're cursed to be this way. As for the Florida Mayhem, someone is a good tank. His off tanks need a little bit of work though. His Devo is not very good, but I think they keep someone. Someone needs to stay as their tank player. Their DPS line, Hydron Checkmate. I mean, I think the only argument you could make is maybe try and find an upgrade at Flex DPS, but I thought Checkmate did okay. I thought Checkmate did pretty well this season.
Yeah. I think overall, like, it had bad moments, of course, but I think overall it was good.
Yeah, I think the only thing that the Mayhem might look at is their support line. Because Surmajed is good, but he sometimes turbo feeds. And Onimo isn't a bad player, but he's just kind of there. He's like he'll get the job done on main support, but he's not gonna be like winning you games. Yeah, so Florida may try and grab a main support out of contenders to try and replace Onimo, and maybe get another flex DPS and replace Surmajed. I don't know. I think their back. If anything's gonna change, it's gonna be their backline. Like RuPaul was okay as well, but out of everything on this Mayhem team, the most likely thing is their support line may get retooled a little bit. So I think their DPS line is a good place for the most part. So, I mean, nobody even expected them to make it this far. So, good job, Mayhem, I suppose.
Good job.
But now for the disappointments. Okay, these 4 teams: Fusion, the Reign, the Dragons, and the Gladiators. Oh no! Which one of these sad teams do you want to talk about first?
Let's start with the one I care the least about.
Fusion?
Hey, Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta. I mean, let's start.
What?
Let's start with Atlanta. Atlanta, man, you guys really showed up to a tournament just to get bopped twice by the Mayhem, playing 2 different tank players.
Yeah, it was.
It was. I mean,
tragic.
When Reign came out against Mayhem and started Gator, I was like, oh, they're done. They're boomed. They're done. They're out of here.
And then
it was. I don't know what happened. I mean, they just fell apart.
Yeah, it was.
They
it was really
just
sad
fell
to
apart
see in one way, but it was also
really funny. It was pretty funny.
It's like America's Funniest Home Videos when there's like something that's really hard to watch because it's sad and terrible, but it's also really, really funny.
Yeah. I mean, it's even funny to the fact that they lost twice to the same team, and that was what got them eliminated. It wasn't like they got beat by the Mayhem and then got like beat by the Shock or the Gladiators. No, they just got beat by the Mayhem twice back-to-back days. Mm-hmm. Reign, I'm so sorry, but man, we had this team ranked 4th, I'm pretty sure, in the preseason rankings. That's unfortunate.
That was really
Reign, but I mean, Reign all season have been. To put this in, I saw a tweet about this. In the second half of the season, they almost had a worse record than the Vancouver Titans.
Dang.
I think they were 6 and like I don't remember what it was because each team played 6 games. I think they were 6 and 6, and the Titans were 5 and 7 in the second half of the season. Like Reign were not good at all. So I mean, them getting rolled out. I mean, when they brought in Gator, I was like, oh, they're boomed. It's over. Bye.
It's over.
Sorry, Reign. The other NA team that was also really funny to watch some fallout was the Gladiators in spectacular fashion, mind you. What was that? I mean, their game against Spitfire was like kind of pathetic.
I mean, I think it was. See, the thing is London Spitfire were a fan favorite team, and so the writers for the Overwatch League approached the Gladiators and offered them a first pick in the off-season draft that happens behind the scenes. And so next year they're gonna have like proper
To replace Kevster? Wait.
Yeah, exactly.
The Gladiators should have been good in this meta. By all
but they weren't.
means, they should. I mean, Reiner was able to play Winston. Happy was able to play Sojourn. Funny Astro on Lucio. And Shu on Kiriko. And what happened? Kevster went Tracer on Dorado. They lost. And then suddenly Kevster's playing Sojourn. And you're like, what is happening? And they were just not coordinated, which is why Spitfire beat them. And then obviously they rolled over Fusion, and we'll get to Fusion in a bit. But then they were just no match for the Shock. I mean, they took a map off Shock, but I mean they flamed out pretty spectacularly.
Yeah, it was really tragic.
I mean, ever since Potapon left this team, something changed here. Like ever since Summer Showdown, this team looked
they just haven't
very
been
messy.
The same team, and I'd be curious to know what's going on behind the scenes because something's got to be.
Something's got to give. Something else has got to give. Shanghai Dragons. Ooh, that wasn't pretty. I mean, it's one thing if the Fusion go only win one map in the first two games and get boomed out. It's another thing when the Dragons only win one map and get boomed out. Lip was doing his best to carry this team kicking and screaming, and it did not work.
It feels like a very Shanghai thing to do.
To go 0-2 in a tournament in playoffs.
To have a pretty reasonably solid season, just kind of dominate APAC with Seoul, and then to make it to the international competition and just get.
I mean, this is the second time now they flame out, because I mean in the midseason madness they flamed out pretty early as well.
Yeah.
So I mean this team it just kind of looked like a shell of themselves from last season. Nothing was working other than Lip. Lip was the only part of this team in playoffs that was actually doing anything. Like Lee Jae-gun and Izayaki were not what they used to be. Fleta all season has been a shell of himself. And then Fate comes back in after not having really been able to play a whole lot, and it didn't work. They really just kind of flopped over a little bit. But I mean, in their defense, they played Spark and Shock, who were the second and fourth team in the tournament. So maybe we cut them some slack on that one. I don't know. But a team we don't cut slack for is the Fusion. My goodness. First, you get 3-0'd by the Spitfire, and then you get 3-1 by a Glads team that got 3-1'd by the Spitfire. Like, come on, Fusion. What are you doing?
Playing League of Legends.
They're playing League of Legends. They were prepping for Worlds.
It was just it was pretty bad.
I mean, it's a few. Hey, I mean, unfortunately, Fusion did come first in something though, in getting eliminated. Good job, Fusion.
Yeah.
You didn't get second.
Yeah, that is good. and like I just it's kind of tragic how
underwhelming this team was.
APAC just didn't look as good as the West.
As Northern, like, yeah. If there was anything we walk away from this tournament, it was outside of Spark, APAC was not good.
Yeah, and that's really sad to see because it's good when the regions are competitive, and I feel like Overwatch has this problem where, and I think when it comes down to it, and we kind of talked about this earlier in this season, is having so many fewer teams inherently puts you at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
Because you don't get the diversity of play styles and stuff, and as soon as you get put up against these teams that you aren't used to playing nonstop, then it's harder to adapt.
Yeah, it is a lot harder to adapt. I mean, and the top of APAC just didn't match up to the top of NA or even the middle of NA. And I mean, Dragons just kind of flamed out. Fusion flamed out. I mean, looking at these four teams, I mean, Fusion, we already know Carpe is leaving. Carpe is leaving for Valorant. So, but I mean, are they going to miss him? As a face, yes, they'll miss him. As a player, honestly, not really. I mean, I don't think he didn't really have a place in this roster.
Yeah.
MN3 and Zest are doing just fine. So I think MN3 Zest stay. I think they could potentially look at getting an upgraded tank. Bellisria did okay, but I feel like if they can find a better tank, they probably will. Their backline definitely will probably be retooled. Fix the Aim God were there. I mean, they weren't flashy all the time, but I mean, to be fair, this backline was kind of thrown together last minute when Alarm passed away. So they weren't really put in a good situation to begin with. So the Fusion I could see being retooled a little bit in the tank and support department, but their DPS line should be fine. Now the Dragons, on the other hand, we know that Void is leaving for his military service, so they're losing Void. I think this team kind of gets blown up. I wouldn't be surprised if the Dragons roster got blown up this offseason. Because I think Fleta is a little washed, and Fate wasn't looking really good. Izayaki, I mean, the whole team, like, the only player who they need to 100% keep is Lip. If they let Lip go, that's a mistake.
Well, and I think if they let Lip go, it's not by their choice.
It's Lip wanting out.
Lips, yeah, which, could happen. I would imagine Lip has options in other teams.
Yeah, just go send him to the Dynasty. Put him with Profit. That would be scary.
That would be terrifying.
So I would say Lip is probably the only one, the most likely to stay on the roster. Because I think the rest of the team, maybe, they've now been, this is now year 3 for all of them. Izayaki's been on this team for almost 4 years now. They've been here a while, and Void is leaving. So the Dragons, I wouldn't be surprised if their team got blown up. Mm-hmm. Looking at the Reign, I think the Reign probably stay. See, the thing about the Reign is, like, their backline is fine. I think and their tank line, I think Hawk just needs to grind out the main tanks a little bit. I don't know if they decide to keep Gator or not, though, because it's like, I don't know what Gator's place is on this team. They may just keep him to keep him, but this season he barely played.
Yeah, I feel like with the Reign, they don't have any, like, blaring issues or anything. Like, I think it makes sense for them to keep
their whole team.
And like, they could change things, but I don't know that they're going to. I don't know that any roster changes are going to be a positive change for them.
No.
I think just financially they don't have, like, huge budget like some of these other teams, mm-hmm. and I think it makes sense for them to just keep roster.
Yeah, they will probably stay. The Gladiators, though, are an interesting one because they've shown this season that they are willing to throw money at proven talent. There was nobody that they picked up this season, I guess, other than Potapon, but Potapon was, like, kind of proven a little bit, but then he left, so it was like,
yeah.
So it's like they're a team of veterans. All of these players, other than Reiner, have been in the league for at least a year or two now. So the Gladiators, I think they keep Kevster happy, although I wouldn't be surprised if they pick up a third DPS player, like a hit scan specialist, or somebody who
Pine in.
Big Boss Pine coming back. I wouldn't be surprised if they picked up a third DPS player. I think they keep their support line unless one of their supports wants out. I think they'd be dumb to let Shu go, but I wouldn't be surprised if they let Skewed leave or if they replace Funny Astro with somebody. Because I think Shu is like, you keep Shu for sure, and you should keep Funny Astro. Skewed is probably the most likely one to potentially go somewhere else, just because his hero pool is like the same as Shu's. It's just Skewed has a better brig, but I feel like you could get away with that. It's their tank line that's interesting, though, because it's like, do you think Space wants to stay on this roster where he gets basically no playtime?
Probably not.
Exactly. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Space tried to feel the market and see who would want him. Because, there are a decent, like, a lot of these mid-table, low-tier teams would kill to have Space on their team. I mean, granted, it's also a question of would Space want to go to a lower? Because I mean, you look above the teams that are, the Gladiators are in company with. It's like the Outlaws don't need a tank, the Shock don't need a tank, the Reign don't need a tank, the Mayhem don't need a tank.
Yeah,
Defiant. I mean, unless Defiant get him, but Defiant look like they want to stay all Korean. So it's like the only place Space could go is down to a lower team to like go.
If he wants playtime.
Well, and if he went, because I mean, one of those lower tier teams would throw money at him. They'd throw money at him, and he would basically be the face of the franchise, and he would guarantee plays. Because I'm looking at, thinking of teams like New York, Vancouver, Las Vegas. Because I mean, man, the Titans. If you put Space on the Titans and build around them, I mean, Aspire, Mirror, Space. I mean, that's the start. That's the starting of a decent roster.
Yeah, or you do the same thing with Vegas. You build up around him.
It would depend on what Vegas decide to do with their roster. Because if you just any one of these teams, if they picked up Space, it would be an immediate upgrade over whatever they have. Like nothing against like False or any of them, but Space is probably the best tank that is not currently getting regular playtime in the league.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like Hanbin and Fearless both at least get some playtime. Collusion, Mikey are both getting playtime. Hawk is getting playtime. Void was getting playtime. Gushue got some playtime. I think Space is probably the best tank player in the league that is not getting regular playtime. And so I would imagine that he probably wants, unless he doesn't care that he's not getting playtime. But someone like Space, I would find that hard to believe.
Yeah, I think I lean towards the thought that he does change teams and he goes to a lower team to get playtime.
And they build around him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there. I would say Titans or Vegas are probably the most likely because Boston have their tank and New York probably want to stay all Korean. I mean, I guess he could go to Washington, but Washington's not going to be willing to throw money at him.
No.
Washington's going budget.
He might be willing to take less money to keep.
No, but I think that Washington looks like they're going budget, and if you're going budget, Space is not the kind of player you're like, oh, we're going budget. We're announcing Space, our tank player.
Yeah, that's true.
So
someone's gonna throw more money.
I think he'll go to somewhere like the Titans. So that is the bracket. That is what happened. It was crazy. What's funny is there were only 2 map 5s.
Dang.
It was the Defiant Spark match and the Outlaws Shock match. Of course, one of the Outlaws games went to 5, and they won it.
Naturally.
As it should be. Then the Outlaws 5 map win. I mean, they were like 14 and 4 on map. I mean, it was their map 5 win rate this season was insane. I mean, I think they were statistically one of the best, if not the best team in map 5, or even on Control. Period.
Yeah, and I think that's potentially even of all time. Like this season, Outlaws on map 5 more consistent wins than anyone else.
Oh yeah, I mean if it went to map 5 and the Outlaws were involved, you would be like, oh, the Outlaws are winning it. Like that's just, it's priced in, unless it was like a reverse sweep. So It was fun stuff. So before we go into predictions, we're done. We did our predictions, our off-season predictions. I want to, so of course we were doing predictions throughout the whole season. We predicted a total of 106 matches.
Dang.
Which was only, I mean, we were only predicting like 5 matches a week. So, I mean, that's only a fraction of matches played. So 106 games. Obviously, going to the last week of the regular season, I was down 2. So I just threw caution to the wind and tried to gain ground and failed spectacularly. I fell even further behind with those picks. So at the end of the season, you had the most correct preds with 65. I had 60. 61% win rate compared to 57%. I obviously didn't have time to go through and check specific team prediction rates and APAC prediction rates. You seem fairly convinced that my APAC prediction rate is better than yours.
I think so.
I don't know.
I have a bad feeling about my APAC
about your APAC preds.
But, you know, it might just be in my head. But
the only thing I know is I'm pretty sure the Outlaws may have negatively hurt my record. Potentially. So it is that. So now for the final part of the final episode is power rankings. So unfortunately, we realized this recently is our preseason power rankings were not a single power rankings. So looking at our preseason power rankings, they were split into two regions. But even just looking at these, we had Shanghai Dragons number 1 in APAC. That didn't age well.
No.
Or even better yet,
terribly.
No, you want one? Here's one that aged terribly. We had Chengdu Hunters at number 2.
Oh man!
But this was before we made these preseason power rankings before the Hunters blew their roster up a little bit. But we had Spark second to last in APAC.
Well,
we had Spark second to last in APAC. Charge was down at the bottom.
If you look at regular season, like the second half of regular season,
they were down there.
Yeah, that's not that hot of a take. Like, our Spark a top like 2 APAC team? I mean, I guess.
I
don't want like.
That's really funny. But of course, the take that aged like milk, London Spitfire in 13th on the North America side.
My boys.
Your boys leveled up. So now we're doing a full combined full international ranking. So number 1, Fuel. I mean, you can't put.
I'm just kidding.
Fuel 1, Shock 2, Tier Break. I don't think that can be contested by literally. I mean, they are clearly so much better than everybody else, right?
Yeah, I think because you had other teams go on these crazy runs
and then get stopped.
Go against one of them and just Outlaws, Spark, same
Dynasty,
thing
all of them.
Dynasty, yeah, like.
Yeah, and because it went to 7, like you can't. There's no tier break between the two of them. I mean, that was literally about as close as it got. But it's when you get into that second tier of teams that things get interesting. Because when we take, like the bracket, like Outlaws didn't play Dynasty. Outlaws didn't play Spark. If Outlaws had played Dynasty and Spark, would the Outlaws have won? Maybe. It's like. If Outlaws had played Spark, it probably would have been a battle of which Sojourn wins more.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're looking at Spark, Dynasty, and Outlaws, it's hard to rate the three of them comparatively because they didn't play each other. Like the Outlaws and Spark both played Spitfire, and Spitfire took a map off of Spark. So that makes me inclined to say that the Outlaws should be 3rd in this power ranking, and then you do Spark. It's like, how would the Spitfire have done against Dynasty?
Yeah.
So it's like I think we put Outlaws 3 because they did perform better against the Spitfire than Spark did. And the Outlaws did beat the Shock, whereas the Dynasty did not. Yeah, it was like a slightly different Shock, but the Outlaws still beat them. So you give them that benefit of the doubt there.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
But then it's like, I think you do Outlaws, Spark, but then do we think Dynasty are above Spitfire or Spitfire above Dynasty?
I think Spitfire are above Dynasty.
All right. And then I think you could put a tier break, right? I think a tier break belongs there under Dynasty. All right. So then after Dynasty, I think you could then go what? Like, because then you have teams like Mayhem, Defiant, Fusion, Gladiators, Dragons. I would say that the bottom. Reign should be at the bottom of that second tier, right? Like, surely the Reign were tragic.
Yeah.
The Reign are definitely at the bottom of that remaining. What would that be? The remaining 6 teams.
Yeah.
I would say the top of that one should be. I mean, it's like I want to say Mayhem, but that feels really weird putting. Because I guess it comes down to: are we basing this off of playoffs or the entire season?
Well,
because that complicates things.
Yeah, it does. And I think genuinely,
you would take the Gladiators over the Mayhem any day.
Yeah.
Like, even if they played in the playoffs, I still would have picked Gladiators over them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can put Gladiators at the top of that group, and then I think you can then do like Mayhem, Defiant, Fusion Rain. Where did Dragons go in this? Do Dragons beat Fusion?
I'd put Dragons above Fusion.
Do Dragons beat Defiant?
I would put Defiant over Dragons.
Okay, so then there we go. So Dragons are middle of the pack there. So then tier break between Gladiators and Dynasty, and then tier break under Reign. Do we think between the teams that didn't make playoffs, like Reign is...
Yeah, I think you have to put it under.
Okay, so then obviously now we have the bottom feeders. So, very bottom. Who belongs at the bottom, the Valiant or the Eternal? Probably the Eternal, right?
Yeah, the Eternal.
Eternal.
Like, I think Valiant occasionally showed us like some nice little thing. Yeah.
Eternal very bottom. Looking at the top of this bracket, I would say the three teams that you could argue I think there are three teams you could argue to be at the top of this non-playoff qualification. Those are the Justice, the Charge, and the Hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Would you take... I mean, Hunters beat Charge in the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
So would you take the Justice over the Hunters or the Hunters over the Justice? Both teams are so inconsistent.
They're so inconsistent, and a lot of it depends on meta. I think between these two, just because the Justice pissed me off more,
Hunters at the top.
Season, I would put Hunters above it.
All right, so then Hunters Justice.
There is no way to objectively do that one.
All right, so Hunters Justice, and then you think Charge are above Uprising? I think Uprising would be in the conversation as well, potentially. I would take Charge over Uprising. I would take Charge
over Uprising. I think Uprising was good.
All right, and then I think the remaining teams will line themselves up, because then it's Valiant. I would take Valiant over New York, Titans, and Eternal. I would take New York over Titans and Eternal, and I would take Titans over Eternal. I think that lines up. All right, so I don't think you think there are any tier breaks in this bottom tier at all?
I mean, they're all teams that didn't matter.
Well, no, but I mean, I think it's like if Boston played Valiant, I think Boston is probably a tier above the Valiant, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely better, but
I think we'll leave it. We'll leave it as a conglomeration of 8 teams that suck.
Yeah.
So our final end of season power rankings: Dallas Fuel 1, San Francisco Shock 2, tier break. Houston Outlaws 3, Hangzhou Spark 4, London Spitfire number 5, Seoul Dynasty number 6, tier break. LA Gladiators, Florida Mayhem, Toronto Defiant, Shanghai Dragons, Philadelphia Fusion, Atlanta Reign, tier break. Hunters, Justice, Charge, Uprising, Valiant, Excelsior, Titans, Eternal. That is crazy power rankings to look at. What's really funny, though, is all the teams under Justice are all just variation on the color blue. Charge, Uprising, Valiant, New York, Vancouver, and Paris are all just like different shades of blue rectangles.
It's the blue teams.
Spitfire and Fuel are the only 2 blue teams that don't suck. That's really funny.
But they really don't suck.
That is really funny.
There are just a lot of blue teams. You know, you don't really realize.
Which is why I appreciate the Spark and their pink roster.
And Mayhem.
Look, it's like all the funky colors. It's like San Francisco's like black and gray, 2. Outlaws green and black, 3. Sparks pink, 4. Gladiators purple, 7. Mayhem's pink, 8. Like all the fun colors are like in the top like 8. All of the boring colors are in the bottom. All the shades of blue and like yellow and stuff. And then right in the middle is Shanghai Dragons with McDonald's. With their red, yellow, and black. But anyways, that is all. The season is now behind us. The 2022 season is finished. Playoffs are finished. We survived. I have no intentions of doing this again next season. I'm sorry, audience, that somehow exists, that might exist, but that sucked. I love Overwatch League, but my goodness, I felt a little burnout there at the end.
GG's, friends. GG's.
GG's. What did we?
Also, since he won't plug it himself, go ahead and check out his new podcast he has with some other students called Knights of the D-Pad.
That sounded scripted.
The link is down below.
Flash it on the screen. Boop, boop, boop.
Right here.
Yeah.
Literally right here.
Nope,
Good luck
there's nothing's gonna. Nope, I'm not putting that in there. Yes, I guess if anybody listening is for some reason deranged enough to enjoy listening to my voice, yes, there is another podcast that I run for BYU's student publication over video games and esports, which is fun stuff. Just jump ship. Just jump from one podcast to another. Bread's not there, but
in the dust.
We take one bearded man and I replaced him with another.
I have a beard. Oh my gosh. I'm just kidding.
All right. Well, with that,
that we've completely unhinged,
we'll sign off for the final time. We hope the few of you that have been with us for the season, we hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the season as much as we did. And I hope you enjoy, hopefully, a short off season and going into next season. Yeah. So thank you for staying with us for the whole season. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.